So we've spoken about confrontational homicides, and now we're going to talk about intimate partner homicide. So before 1974, whenever a husband assaulted his wife, the assault was considered a misdemeanor. And basically, domestic violence was considered a private matter. As a result of that, criminologists really failed to focus on interpersonal violence and homicide. In the 80s, though, feminists and the battered women's movement brings this topic into the public realm, and we start to see it gain some more attention. So let's start with some definitions. So intimate partner homicide, which is what we'll be using probably throughout this chapter, is used to reflect the killing of a victim by an offender who is either currently or was formerly in a sexual relationship with the victim. So this goes beyond just a husband or a wife, and it would include former partners and people who were not married. Euroxide includes wife killing, leaves out former wives, common law relationships, and husbands killed by their wives. Spousal homicide refers to people who were married, and so that leaves out former spouses and common law relationships. And domestic homicide includes any homicide that occurs within a family. So a domestic incident also includes anyone you live with, so that could include a roommate, brother, or sister. So intimate partner homicide is probably the most inclusive term, because it includes both married and unmarried people and straight and gay couples. So men are less likely to be killed by their intimate partners than women are. 1/3 of female homicide victims and 5% of male homicide victims are killed by their intimate partners. In 2004, 579 men murdered their wives, common law wives or ex-wives. In the same year, 149 wives murdered their husbands, common law husbands or ex-husbands. 445 men murdered their girlfriends, and 147 women murdered their boyfriends. So men in the U.S. kill their intimate partners about 3.5 times as often as women kill their intimate partners. IPH may vary by the type of intimate relationship. So some studies have compared ever married couples, people who were ever married, to non-married couples who live together. The risk of homicide is greater for non-married couples. They are at 10 times the risk. So that's a very big significant difference. That varies by race. Intimate partner homicide rates are highest amongst blacks. Native Americans are higher than whites. And Asian and Pacific Islander have the lowest rates. Latinos have a relatively low risk compared with blacks. Victimization here is higher for women than men, and this also varies by race and sex. So black males have the highest risk between 1981 and 1998. The next order goes for black females, Native American females, Native American males, white and Asian females, and white and Asian males. Victims and offenders of interpersonal homicide tend to be older than other types of homicides. And men involved in intimate partner homicide are older on average than women who are killed by or kill their intimate partners. Men are most at risk for victimization in their later 30s to 50s, while women are most at risk for victimizations in their 20s until 50. Peak ages for offenders were older for men, and relationships with greater age differences are at higher risk. Married women are more likely to be killed by their partners when they're married to older men. Non-demographic factors are also linked with intimate partner homicide, so if there's been previous violence or abuse in the relationship, or drug use by the abuser. So from 1976 to 2000, the number of men murdered by their partners dropped from 68%. And data for women shows improvements, but not quite as much. So from 1976 to 1993, the number of women murdered by their partners remained stable, and from 1993 to 2000, it decreased by about 20%. So the number of women killed by their partners still remains higher than the number of men killed by their partners. Intimate partner homicide is not uncommon in other countries. So in the US, it's about 10% of homicides. In Australia, 22%, and in Canada, 20%. In the US, the number of women who kill their partners is closer to the number of men who kill their partners in other countries. In other countries, men outnumber women in greater numbers as IPH offenders. And in the US, men commit about 80% of all intimate partner homicides. Gender differences. Women in the U.S. are more likely to be killed by their partners than by any other type of offender. Intimate partner homicides often linked to intimate partner violence. And so research tends to focus then on IPV and male offenders, female victims. Most IPH involves a single offender and a single victim. Some do kill one or more of their children as well, or they may commit suicide. And men and women also kill their partners for different reasons. It's extremely rare for a woman to kill her partner as an end to a long cycle of violence that she has perpetrated. So women are much more likely to kill someone who's been battering them. Men often batter their partners for years before they kill them, and they're often trying to control their partner. Men are also more likely than women to kill a partner from whom they've separated. Men are more likely to commit familicide or suicide. So familicide is when we kill the rest of our family. Men are also more likely to kill when they find out their partner has cheated on them. And they're also more likely then to kill the partner's paramour. Women who kill their partners, as I mentioned, often do so as self-defense. It's rare that IPH has more than one offender, and women are more likely to use an accomplice than men are. So in 2001 in Ohio, Donna Roberts and Nathaniel Jackson plotted to kill Roberts' partner. The two were having an affair, and they wanted to collect on an over $500,000 life insurance policy. Jackson was incarcerated, and the two wrote over 100 letters about their plan. Jackson shot Fingerhut, and both were found guilty and sentenced to death. So why might people kill an intimate partner? Well, some of these are expressive killings, while others are instrumental. In an instrumental killing, an offender is trying to gain something: insurance money, custody of the kids, to not have to pay child support. And in expressive killing, one partner strikes out to hurt the other. So this is about jealousy, fear, greed, anger, and rage. It can be difficult to tell if an intimate partner homicide is expressive or instrumental, because it often has elements of both. So in 2006, when police officer Jeff Dennis shot his wife Carly and killed her because she had an affair. Initially, he reported it as a suicide, and then he gave conflicting reports. Basically, when he couldn't account for the blood spatter on his shirt. So here the motivation could be, if I can't have her, no one else can, which is instrumental, or it could be anger, rage, sexual jealousy, fear she would leave him. And it could be all of the above. In December 2001, Manolito Pescador killed his wife Norma with a nail gun, and he called the police himself and admitted to it. He told his adult son that she had been unfaithful and was abusing one of their younger children. The adult son testified that his father was very jealous and abusive, and that his mother was not having an affair. Pescador did have a history of violence against his wife and had threatened to kill them both by crashing their car. Neighbors said he constantly accused her of affairs and that Norma believed he would kill her. Leaving or threatening can actually increase the risk for homicide. The actual most dangerous time for a battered woman is when she actually leaves her partner. So male offenders are much more likely to murder their partners because they attempted to or threatened to leave. This is the primary or secondary factor in Chicago for 13% of husbands, 4% of wives, 5% of common law husbands, etc., etc. Family life sometimes increases the risk of homicide. If a marriage ends, the husband generally has more to lose than the wife does, and men are therefore more likely than women to kill their spouses as a result of the dissolution of a marriage. So women are generally worse off economically at the end of a marriage, but men are worse off socially and psychologically. And there's research to back that up. So Durkheim had studied suicide and noted that connections to family were often related to lower suicide rates. As a result, we can see how then divorce might be connected to suicide rates. Durkheim was likely getting at issues of control and status for men in a patriarchal society. Men are expected to be leaders and be in control, and when a woman leaves, this may be challenging to his sense of power. Gloria Hernandez killed her husband after he attacked her with a knife, and she stabbed him to save herself. As a result, the grand jury refused to indict her for murder. Often, though the outcome is worse, some women are sent to prison or sentenced to death. Frances Harrop in Canada in 1940 shot her husband twice while he was asleep, and she told the police it was his life or mine. She was sentenced to hang, but was granted a new trial because of a judicial error. She was tried again and this time found not guilty by reason of insanity. At the time, battered women's syndrome was not known. So in order for a woman who killed their batterer to be found not guilty, they often have to do so via an insanity plea. Law enforcement doesn't always know that a case they're looking at is an intimate partner homicide. So Piper Roundtree killed her former husband, Michael Jablin, to gain sole custody of her kids and to avoid paying $750,000 in back child support. She shot him in his driveway, and police did not immediately suspect her. She didn't live in the same state, and when she went and killed him, she was wearing a wig, and she had traveled with her sister's ID. So this appears to be an instrumental homicide. and she was sentenced to 20 years. Canadian data finds that knives are the most common, followed by guns. And then another 15% of victims were beaten to death and 13% were choked to death. Now, in the U.S. overall, guns are the most common most common weapon used in an intimate partner homicide by men and women. Nearly 60% of male victims and 64% of female victims. Knives were the second most common. In Chicago, in a study from 1965 to 1990, found that guns and knives were pretty much equally used. So female partners often use a weapon of opportunity, and often that's a knife. Wives were more likely to use a gun than girlfriends when killing a male partner. So can we do anything in terms of public policy that would make a difference in terms of intimate partner homicide? So over the past 25 plus years, we have seen a considerable decrease in IPH. And public policy appears to have made an impact, although the impact is very complicated. So we do have significantly more resources for battered women, and it is easier for women to leave their husbands. Therefore, generally, resources for battered women are significantly associated with lower rates of women killing their husbands. So basically, legal advocacy and other resources have helped women see they have options beyond killing their husband to escape. Ironically, though, these resources are actually more successful in saving the lives of abused men, because the women are not killing them, than it is in saving battered women. 2003, Dugan attempted to explain this by comparing non-marital heterosexual IPH with marital IPH. So he looked at 48 cities, and for 65% of them, more alternatives to living with or depending on an abusive partner coincided with lower levels of IPH. So, for example, as aid to families with dependent children benefits declined, more unmarried men were killed by their girlfriends. And this was particularly true for black men. Increases in men killing their so we saw increases in men killing their black girlfriend, but not their white girlfriend. Unmarried intimate partners were less likely to be killed when DV arrest policies were more aggressive, but aggressive arrest policies did not appear to affect IPH by spouses, so only unmarried folks. Legal advocacy was connected with fewer killings of white wives by their partners. Warrantless arrest policy seemed to be associated with a decrease in killing of unmarried male intimates and unmarried white females. And education appears to provide some protection against IPH overall, but this did not hold true for African American intimates who were not married. In terms of court, in the past, husbands could beat their wives so long as they followed what's called the rule of thumb. And think about when we say, oh, as a rule of thumb, this is what this is referring to. So basically, the rule of thumb says he could not beat her with an instrument whose circumference was smaller than the circumference of his thumb. So basically, think about how fat your thumb is around. You can't beat your wife with anything fatter than that. In some places, a man who killed his wife was having an affair, and was not prosecuted. This was seen as justified. A Toronto study compared IPH and non-intimate partner homicide found individuals accused of killing their partners are less likely to be charged with first-degree murder than those killing non-intimate partners. Those accused of killing an intimate partner were more likely to plead guilty, and for those who go to trial, those accused of killing their intimate partners are more likely to be found guilty. Battered women syndrome was developed in how we could see how it's been used in court. And in the U.S., it's what's called an affirmative defense. So basically, you're not denying that you have broken the law and that you have killed somebody, but you're basically saying that it is somehow justified. In order to use this, it must be reasonable force against someone else when you reasonably believe the other person is threatening you with imminent unlawful harm. So, this is self-defense, is this affirmative defense. So Frances Hughes killed her husband by setting his bed on fire while he slept. No imminent harm here. If you use a gun to kill someone hitting you with a fist, that might not be reasonable force. So battered women syndrome is basically a form of PTSD. And it may explain why a woman kills an abusive husband. But generally, it's not a defense to murder. Basically, it's used as a mitigating circumstance. And as of 2004, 30 states allowed testimony on this in court. And that wraps up the chapter on intimate partner homicide.